Dear students, welcome back to Property Law. So that's HOE 6011. And well, we continue on with the lecture and I'll be talking about things. Last time we were looking at how property can be lost. So today we look at some more definitions of property. Now there will be some homework assignments and things. Maybe I'll announce them next week. So don't worry about that. We're going slowly and steadily, and we are on track. So it should not be a problem. And of course, whatever material I am stating is also available in Moodle. I'll also put up some videos and YouTube links and things like that, so that you can get a better idea about the examples that I'm making in the class. So we continue now. We're looking at some more definitions. So this would now be tangible property, and tangible has to be compared with intangible. Now tangible, of course, is something like this. Yeah, you can feel it, you can smell it, you can touch it. You have an idea about it. Tangible is something like this, where it's metal, so it makes sense. Of course, intangible, on the other hand, is not so clear. What would be the value of this property, this thing here? Well, for me, I pick it up in Lisbon. Yeah, so it has fond memories for me. So although this thing may be worth €5, for me it's a bit more because it reminds me of nice sunny Lisbon. Yeah. So of course it could be a gift from a friend. It could be a family heirloom, and so that comes under the realm of goodwill. And then of course this is not easy to explain. So if it's tangible, then of course you can put a value to it, and it's quite relatively easy to understand its importance and things. And the older it gets, maybe it becomes more valuable. But when it's intangible, yeah, it's about things like 15 years ago the share price of Nokia had a certain value, and the trademark Nokia also had a certain value. And now, well, over a period of time, this value has reduced, has gone down a bit. Maybe some other factors have come into the picture. Now, those of you who are from Finland and Estonia, you may have heard about Stockman and the price, for which they sold the the house, yeah, the building. But that's just one factor. If you wanted to sell the trademark Stockman, of course, that would be a totally different thing, because not only are you selling the property, but also something called goodwill. Goodwill is what attracts customers to Stockman. Yeah? Whether you are in Helsinki or in Tallinn, if you want to go shopping to one of the best places for the high-end brands, well, you go to Stockman. So that's sort of the reputation that it has, and that by itself has a different value altogether. So of course it's easy to put a value to the house or to the building and say, okay, this is worth 100 million euros. But what is the value of the trademark Stockman? How do you put a value to that? Some of the most valuable brands today would be maybe Facebook, of course, Apple, Google, Tesla. Yeah, I mean, these things don't really follow something they're not really realistic sometimes. Some of the prices are just hype. You have no idea what it is. So for example, the Tesla stock has been going up. Now if you compare Tesla and the output of Tesla with, say, Toyota or Volkswagen, Tesla doesn't make bigger, better, faster cars. So what's the reason for the valuation of the trademark Tesla, or the company brand Tesla, or the share prices of Tesla? Yeah. So of course these are important, relevant factors. And then these are all things which are intangible. The prices change. I don't know if you have been following what was happening in the United States 2 3 weeks ago, with Robinhood and GameStop, and then all the share prices were rallying, and all these people on Reddit wanted to make some hedge funds bankrupt. And so you see, you have a value of a share, which is, I mean, there is the face value. So it was, let's say, €10, and it's traded on the stock exchange, and it was trading for $50, and now it went up to $300 and then came up and down. So all of these are what comes under intangible, and these are of course very hard to value, but they are property nonetheless. And of course, when we look at intangibles, then we go into intellectual property, for example, trademarks, patents, copyrights, designs. Again, very difficult to put a value to them. Now, 2 3 years ago, yeah, if somebody had made a vaccine for coronavirus, what would it be worth? No, nothing, right? Nobody had even heard of coronavirus. Last year, what would the value of coronavirus as a vaccine have been? We can't say, because by summer things looked quite good in the European Union. But today, the stock of Pfizer, AstraZeneca, all of these have gone up because this is a vaccine in demand. Maybe after a year, the whole virus just disappears. Yeah, so again, the value of the vaccine comes down to zero. So these are things which come under intangible or incorporeal property definition. So it's explanatory, self-explanatory in itself. Then we look at immovable property. This is very important because immovable property cannot be moved. That's the basic thing. Vis-a-vis movable property, which of course can be moved from one place to another. Now, some of these definitions, if you look at them, from the French Civil Code, they look a bit silly, and you would be wondering, why is Pawan talking about movable and immovable properties, or tangible, intangible properties? But maybe you should let your imagination go wild and look at this from a different viewpoint. Shares are movable property. So if you look at the definition of a movable property, it's not just the property itself, but what happens to whatever comes out of it, whatever is produced by that property. Now, in the case of an apple tree, it gives apples. The same way, shares, you get dividends. Then just from the apple tree, you can plant it and you get a new tree here. So for example, in the same way with shares, well, you can get stock splitting, for example. So this could be rearrangement of the company under company law. This could be amalgamation. This could be diversification, whatever you call it here. And so when that happens, what happens to the property that we are dealing with? So in this context, let's say your parents had Nokia shares, and then Microsoft took over Nokia. So let's say they have a swap deal, and they say 5 shares of Nokia is equal to 1 share of Microsoft. Yeah. So in that situation, if you're a Microsoft owner, suddenly your price goes up, the value of the property, as in the shares, goes up. If you're a Nokia owner, well, instead of 5 shares, now you end up with 1 Microsoft share. So again, you have all of this division that happens. And to understand all of this, of course, movable property is the definition. Now, why do we stress on definitions so much under the law? Well, because number one, again, taxation. Yeah, so you could have a different tax regime or registration regime for movable property vis-a-vis immovable property. So for example, I have a house, and it has to be registered somewhere. Yeah, very important, in the land register records, because it's immovable property. And of course, when I sell this house, I need to have a written agreement, because that's what the law would say. When you deal with immovable property, that's how it is to be done. But if you have a movable property, for example, a car, a pen like this or whatever, which you want to sell on eBay or whatever, maybe you don't even need a register as such, registration. Well, of course, with automobiles, you do need, but under the Motor Vehicles Act. But under stamp duties or court fees or whatever you have, it depends on what definition your product goes into, all right, or your property goes into. So these definitions are very important. And of course, something could be immovable, but then you could uproot the tree and now it becomes movable. And something could be movable, and I could stick it with, I don't know, Gorilla Glue or whatever to the floor, and now it's stuck, it doesn't come out. So of course, these are important definitions, not only from the property law point of view, but because they have ramifications under different laws, inheritance laws, family laws, taxation laws, all sorts of these things, laws of obligation, contractual agreements, all of these aspects come into the picture. So now this is the definition part, quite simplistic. But now I'll talk a bit more about theory. All right. Of course, you can read it all here. Even in the notes, there's a lot of stuff on property, and there's Rousseau, then there's Marx. There are all these articles by Locke and everybody, and these are basically theoretical viewpoints about what does it mean to have property. What are the implications of property, and these are very important aspects. Arrangement of property, for example, over here would state that property is of the common property system, collective property, private property, and things like that. Now these definitions are by themselves self-explanatory, but rather we have to look at more deeper issues that go with them. So, for example, Norway, all right, or Saudi Arabia. So, for hundreds, thousands of years, these are just stupid places. Who would go to a desert or to this frozen place from where the Vikings come? And it has its own rugged beauty, but that's it. And then they found oil, and oil changed everything. So suddenly you now have a situation where you can find oil, and well, if you don't handle this resource properly, you can have a lot of problems. See, for example, Libya, where as long as Gaddafi was there, he kept everything with an iron hand, and he controlled everything. But now that has gone, Gaddafi is gone, the whole old regime is gone, and you basically have a civil war between one side, the East, and the West. So, one side has oil, the other side has some population or ports or whatever. And now they don't want to share the oil resources. So you have a oil rich country, but they're just fighting over every possible thing. Now, if you look at, for example, the Norwegians or the Kuwaitis or the Saudi Arabians, what they decided was that no, this will be a national resource. So we nationalize all of this more or less, and then we use this oil revenue very carefully. We don't just blow it up on parties and cocaine or whatever, but instead we have a development fund. We use this money for our own domestic purposes, and then money attracts money, so then we use it for investments. So if you're in Norway and you are in the on top of the fund, it's a public resource, and oil will not last forever. So you have to use this in a smart way. If you don't, you just finish it all off. So it could be a party for 100 years, and after that again, back to square one. But of course, if you use this resource wisely, you can always figure out how to maximize the potential or the benefits for the entire population. And that way you don't have civil wars or angry groups of people saying that, oh, you are stealing something or you are not sharing, etc., etc. So in a common property system available for use by all members, so a park, for example, so anybody can go to Cadriok Park and have a little picnic over there or whatever. Then you have collective property. It's an important resource, and so the community decides how to use it. This could be, for example, in the Soviet Union, you had these 5-year plans, and so everything is collective in that sense. And so of course, you're looking at the military resources, economic resources. Of course, the Soviet Union took socialism to the next level, communism, and well, didn't work out. But for example, in the United States, you could have different oil wells, and people can just set up an oil well and just suck out whatever oil is down there under their land, and it's theirs. And of course, then they can sell it to whoever wants to buy it, and so of course you can have all sorts of these issues. This could also be with water resources, for example, and this is especially important because groundwater is a huge resource in many countries, especially in desert countries, for example. So in Saudi Arabia in the 70s, they discovered that there was this amazing, like a mini freshwater sea under the desert, and this had formed from millions of years of percolation of drops and moisture and things. And so they were like, wow, yippee, yeah, let's use it. And so they started growing rice and crops over there, and just digging deeper and deeper and sucking out all the groundwater using high powered water pumps. And 10 years, that's it, the water is over. Back to square one. So of course, this is how some of the issues arise. And then there is private property, which is assigned to an individual or to a family or to a group as such, or to a firm, which would be there's a natural person, or then there is a company or a firm or something like that. And now this property belongs exclusively to this one owner, and she or he is the owner. I mean, they can decide whatever they want to do, and whether they want to share it or not. No explanation to anybody. All right, so I own this pen. I don't like it, I can break it. Yeah, do I have to explain it to anybody? No, of course not. It's my pen. I can do whatever I want to do with it. Yeah, the same goes with this paper thing. I decide to set it on fire. Yeah, sure, go ahead. Do whatever. Just don't damage anybody else's property. And that's what we saw in the course of the first lecture, right? So of course, with private property, it could be like you have a business. So let's say you have a restaurant or a shopping chain, and now there is coronavirus, and well, it's not profitable anymore, so you shut it down. Do you owe an explanation to your employees, to your suppliers, to your customers? No, you're the owner. You like it, you keep it. You don't like it, you shut it down. Yeah, that's it. So of course, this is important, but this is private property. When it's private property, of course, if the government or anybody else wants to take it from you, they have to give you adequate compensation for that. But of course, you see, it's a mistake in law to think that all of these rights exist like compartmentalized ways, because that's not how the law is. And there's black, there is white, and then there is this giant gray zone in the middle, and that is often something which we have to take into account, especially from a property law perspective. So for example, there are some common property rules regarding streets and parks. Then there are collective property rules regarding maybe military bases, and then there are private property rules, yeah, about what you own, your house, your cycle, or whatever. But still there are some rules. So let's say you have a house, and it's in the city, and it's winter time, so snow collects on the roof. Now it's your duty to clear out the roof. It's also your duty to clear out the footpaths ahead of your house, in front of your house. If you get lazy, you don't want to do it, a big chunk of ice falls on somebody's head who's just walking outside your house, and they get hurt, then you are responsible. So of course, these are responsibilities that come up. The same also goes, for example, with Old Town. So you have the Old Town. It could be in Tallinn, it could be Gamlastan, in Stockholm, and you buy a nice little cozy apartment over there. And it's 16th century, so you really like the whole atmosphere there. But now there are rules. You can't paint the outside walls neon purple. You can't do that. There's a rule what sort of paint has to be there. It has to be as per the city rules, which may have existed for all these hundreds of years. You can't just change the shape randomly. Then windows may be wooden, and they're not very efficient in that sense, so it feels very cold. But you can't break down those antique windows and put up plastic windows. No, you can't do that. So that's why people live in the Old Town, and they have to put this masking tape on the edges of the windows, and it's so stupid, but that's the way it is. If the property breaks, or is damaged, you can't just change it with whatever material. You have to use certain type of brick, certain types of mortar, certain types of cement, because it has to retain the 16th century look, which makes it extremely expensive to maintain. Yeah, so you have to be very careful about these things. If the roof tiles break, you can't just change it with an asbestos roof or a metal roof. So all of these are restrictions that are imposed on an owner. The same even goes with your car. You own your car, you think it's yours, but no, that's not always the case, because you have to get a pollution certificate for the car. If the emissions have to be under control. If your car is too old, then you could have restrictions on it. You can't drive around in a 30-year-old car, which could be quite a problem, because some people collect cars. I know some Germans who collected these 100-year-old Mercedes cars, and then the new rule is that you can't drive a 100-year-old Mercedes car engine because it's very polluting. So you have to remove the engine and replace it with an electronic motor and mess around with inside, so that you can drive it on the streets, during one or two of those special festivals. And then there are some exemptions that are given, and things like that. So these are all important aspects to keep in mind when we look at property, and there are some more theoretical aspects as to who is the owner. And then of course this is now extremely problematic. Well, maybe you are the owner because your parents owned it. So the question is, how did your parents become the owners? Well, maybe your dad got it from his grandmom. Okay. How did she become the owner? Yeah. Well, maybe Field Marshal Mannerheim gifted it to her. Yeah. So who is this Field Marshal Mannerheim, and what power does he have? So yeah, he was in charge of Finland during the Finnish Civil War. Okay, so what before that? Maybe it belonged to somebody else. So of course, especially with the older houses, you always have a lot of these problems. In the Estonian context, there have been a lot of these issues. For example, there were these Baltic Germans who owned a lot of the manor houses and all the nice houses in the old town, and they had been there for hundreds of years. And then there were always some rumblings, something or the other, against them in the Tsarist Russian times. And in 1905 there was this big revolt that was crushed. Then in 1919, there was again this 1917 was the Soviet Red Uprising, and then of course the Tsar was killed later on, and now you had this Soviet Communist and the White forces fighting, and there were again a lot of problems for the Baltic Germans. And then Estonia became independent, and there was this whole Estonianization, anti-Germanification of Estonia. And this was seen also in Latvia and Lithuania to a certain extent. And all these Baltic German landlords, had to change their names and things like that. So my wife's grandmother had some fancy German sounding name, and then she had to change it to Hobbe Valley, because that's the Estonian version of whatever it was in German. So this is weird stuff. And then of course, well, then there were still some Baltic Germans who were living in Estonia, and then when Hitler came to power, then Hitler sent out this message that all Germans, people with German blood, have to come back to the fatherland, Deutschland, and you have to stay in Germany, and then we'll conquer Poland and Soviet Union, whatever, and then we'll give you some places there later on. So a lot of the Baltic German families had no choice. They had to go back to Germany if they really wanted to. So again, you have a problem here, and the problem is that these people left, so the houses still remain. So new people came, stayed in, and so the question is, who is the owner? Where does this ownership thing start from or end at? So, well, the law tends to take a very practical viewpoint about these things, and so what the law says is possession is 9/10 of ownership. All right. Now, if you have that document that you are the owner, very good. If you don't have the document, then the next best thing is that you are the possessor of the property, and just as if you possess it, and if you've been possessing it for so many tens of years or hundreds of years, then it's in your family, it's in your possession. Now, these things, of course, make sense in maybe the United Kingdom, yeah, or in Sweden. When was the last time Sweden was invaded? I have no idea. The UK was invaded last in 1066, Battle of Hastings, when the Normans invaded England in the 10th century. After that, there have been no invasions as such. So you have a very stable system, and so ownership, possession go sort of hand in hand. But on the other hand, if you look at Estonia, for example, that's not so straightforward. Or even Finland. Finland was a part of Sweden, just like Estonia was. Then Finland became a duchy in Tsarist Russia. Estonia became a part of Tsarist Russia for many hundreds of years. Then you had this civil war, and okay, Finland became independent. So you already have, in like the last 300 years, you have three major events taking place. And in the case of Estonia, in the last 100 years, you have like 3-4 amazing historical changes taking place. And so ownership often becomes a very important question. So possession is seen as the key. Of course, possession is not an end by itself. I put up some aspects of Estonian property law here just for you to know, but of course, possession is protected by law against arbitrary action. Now, what would this mean? Let's say you are in a bus and suddenly you realize you don't have your iPhone. It's missing. What can you do? Well, I'll tell you what you cannot do, all right? You cannot tell the bus driver to stop and lock the doors from inside and then go about, opening up everybody's purses and jackets. And you cannot take a phone from me and say, hey, you Indian guy, how did you get this expensive iPhone? I bet it belongs to me. Yeah, you can't say that. Simply because I'm the possessor of the property, and if I'm the possessor, well, you have to prove that I am wrongfully in possession. I don't need to prove or justify anything. This is something which also is a very important aspect of what we know as law of evidence. All right, the law of evidence deals with onus of proof, burden of proof. So let's say I'm sitting quietly in one corner and you come and tell me, Pawan, these specs are yours, and I'm a thief, that Pawan's a thief. Well, I don't need to give my specs to you, of course not. I'm in possession of them. If you are claiming that my specs are yours, then you have to prove it in a court of law. I don't have to do anything. I just have to sit quietly and say, I don't know who you are, you're just crazy, and please leave me alone. So the burden of proof is on you. Of course, what would now happen is, let's say you are able to prove that you owned specs like these. You are able to prove that you came to the university in the morning and you were wearing specs like these, and you're able to prove that you kept these specs in the classroom and then you forgot all about them and you lost them. Then it becomes an issue. Then it's my problem now to prove that no, I'm sorry, you're mistaken. I bought these specs 3 years ago. You can see all my YouTube videos and I've been wearing these same specs, so obviously they're not the same. Now, of course, specs may sound a bit silly, but if you're talking about expensive items, this is a burden of proof. So possession is deemed illegal until the contrary is proved. So that's a very important element to keep in mind. So property law and the law in general protects your possession or the rights of possession. Possession is protected by law against arbitrary action. Very important. I can't just go and kick you out of your flat and say, I'm the owner and you are my tenant and get out of my flat. No, there has to be a legal process that has to be followed in this regard. Self-help, of course, a possessor may protect the possessor's possession by force against arbitrary action without exceeding the limits of self-defense. So I'll put up this video here. Let me make a note of it. So there's this Russian woman fighting like mad. So I'll put that up and you can see how it's justified. Of course, the important aspect here is self-defense. Self-defense is a very peculiar aspect of law. Let's say I'm you know you are walking in the park and I come to attack you with a knife. Um, so in that case, well, of course, you are justified in punching me. Yeah. Um, but you can't take my knife and stab me with it. Yeah, we haven't reached that stage yet. If I try to kill you and there is a justifiable fear that is caused that by my actions I will harm you grievously or kill you, then you are justified in self-defense and killing me in return. But again, this is a gray zone. All right. So when we talk about a possessor and the right of a possessor to protect her possession by force against arbitrary action, the important aspect here is without exceeding the limits of self-defense. So in this video you will see there's this young girl in a metro, and some guy comes, huge big guy comes to her and tries to steal her mobile phone, and so she fights back and she kicks him in between his legs, and you can see the video. It's super painful. um, was she justified in doing that? Like, hello, I mean, the poor guy could become impotent or something. He could die. Is that the same as the price of your stupid iPhone 4 or something? Well, it's a self-defense, and the law protects your right in this case. You also have a right to search. So there are some of these rights over here, but of course within limits. You can't exceed those limits. What are the limits is of course extremely problematic from a legal viewpoint. um, so basically, if you're not a cop, please don't try to be a cop. All right. Police officers have certain responsibilities and of course certain safeguards, because of their uniform, because of their status in society. You as a citizen don't have the same rights. All right. If a police officer shoots somebody, well, in the line of duty, and if it is justifiable, then yeah, she or he can do it. But as you as an private individual, you can't go around shooting people. All right. And so even if it is to protect your own property, well, you can't really take somebody's life in that regard. So again, it's a gray zone and something to be careful about. But then there are some theoretical questions which are a bit more deeper. Who ought to be the owner? Yeah. It's not like you are the owner, but the question is, do you deserve to be the owner? And now this is a very tricky situation here. We have all come across this in many ways. There are different examples of this. For example, there are people who think that you shouldn't be too rich. Yeah. That whole thing against that 1% of the population, who controls the remaining 99%, for example. Then you have, the richest people in the world. And then, a lot of questions that come up as to how the hell do you become so rich? And do you deserve to be so rich? Yeah. So of course, everybody asks the same questions to Bill Gates, to that Amazon guy, to everybody. And the Queen of England, like, what the hell, why does she own so many palaces and castles and houses? Who gave it to her? So of course there's the labor theory, which would argue that if you do something, you perform labor on it, you transform it, you deserve to be the owner. Then there's a social contract theory, which says you get this ownership title from the state, yeah, or whatever, yeah, humanity or society. Then the natural law theory says, no, circular economy, everything belongs to everybody, sharing economy. You shouldn't have these rigid ownership rules. Everybody should have ownership of everything. But utilitarian, a bit utopian in a way, but that's socialism, next step communism, things like that. Then there is the utilitarianism theory, which says that whoever does the best good, for the greatest number of people, they deserve to be the owners. Now this can be extremely complicated because this was the justification for colonialism, in the 17th and 18th century. So how do you justify Europeans going into North America and South America and beating up the Red Indians and taking away their land? So to justify that, well, then some people like Locke and others said, well, what were the Red Indians doing in North America? Yeah, come on, let's ask. What were the Apache doing, the Iroquois doing, the Blackfoot, the Crow? What did they do? Yeah, they lived this pastoral lifestyle. They were hunting buffalo and bison or whatever, and then just living in tents and just having fun time. But the cowboy came, the white Europeans, they took over the land and turned America into this industrial powerhouse. Brought modern agricultural techniques and transformed the usage of the grounds and the land. So they deserve to be the owner because they did a lot more good than the Red Indians. Now, this is not exactly a very nice thing to suggest, and of course, a lot of these problems have arisen about this. It's not sorted out yet. There is still this anti-colonialism campaign, anti-slaving, slave trade campaign, and things like that. So of course, this is a very slippery thin ice, and it can be a very problematic theory. And then there's a cost benefit analysis, which says that the most productive user must get the title. So some of these are the various theories, but you often come across them in different forms. For example, there are people who say you should tax the rich. How much? I don't know. Somebody was saying that if somebody earns an income of more than 1 billion, yeah, or has assets of more than 1 billion euros or dollars, then they should pay 100% tax. Yeah, random. Yeah. Then Bill Gates very famously said that after he dies, his children will not inherit 100% of his property because that would be stupid. He came up in life, he had a reasonable background, but he invested, did a lot of smart things, and became super rich. So he doesn't want to just give all of that wealth to his children because they will not appreciate the fact of how you have to work to earn money. So he will not give them all his property, maybe a bit of it, but the rest will go to charity. And then you have in some countries a death tax, which says that after your person dies, then that person's property will go to his or her children, but they have to pay a certain tax on that property. And this was quite popular in the UK, still is. And the whole idea was, you had these manor houses and country estates and 1,000 acres or 500 hectares of land, and it just stays in the family, and that's so stupid. So we shouldn't have that. And so this person dies, then when the next generation inherits the property, they should pay a tax on it, quite a substantial bit, 20%, 30% of tax, 40% of tax, and that's a lot of money. So of course, either you can stagger it out and pay it over 20 years, or you sell the property and then whatever money you have, you pay that as tax and then keep the rest as your profit or whatever. So of course, these are all very deep theoretical questions, no simple answers for any of these. So how do you justify property rights? Well, you could justify them on economic grounds, and economic grounds is always a problem area because you're just basically trying to say that if you can make money from it, then you deserve it. If you can't make money from it, then you shouldn't. But that goes against the whole concept of charity and communal living and things like that. Then there are single property systems, and so Karl Marx and everybody were against it. So resources, how do you own national resources? So we had this discussion sometime about this. What about water utilities, supplies, water supply? Can somebody monopolize the water supply? Shouldn't that be a public thing? Then there is the criteria for measuring the success of a particular form of ownership, and should they exclude others? How do you justify sharing versus monopolizing of property? So these are all these issues that are there. Then there's also this concept of a trust, and I'll put up some material on it so you can read about it in more detail. And again, a very interesting viewpoint about how property is viewed or seen as. Okay, so well, I'll end here for today. I'll post this video lecture and some other reading material for you people, and then let's see, we meet again next week. So until then, have a nice time and see you later. Bye.